The prison blood test should have been routine, until it said, "Release him, Your Majesty," to the human. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The sterile white walls of Detention Center 47 reflected the harsh artificial lighting that never dimmed, never changed, and never allowed the inmates to forget they were constantly being observed. Nathan Brooks had spent 342 days in this Centurion prison, though he had stopped counting after the first 100. Chief Medical Officer Valera Kex inspected the monitoring equipment in the laboratory with practiced efficiency. Today was blood screening day for Section C, a tedious but necessary protocol for maintaining the prison's database. The prisoners would be processed one by one, their genetic material analyzed, cataloged, and stored according to Centurion Penal Code regulations. "Bring in the first subject," she instructed the guard drone hovering near the door. The metallic sphere beeped in acknowledgement and disappeared through the sliding door. Moments later, it returned, escorting a human male. Prisoner 47C, 89. According to his file, he had been arrested for unauthorized presence in a restricted zone and suspected espionage, though no concrete evidence had been found to support the latter charge. Nathan shuffled into the room, his ankles bound by gravitational restraints that limited his movement to small, measured steps. His once muscular frame had thinned during his incarceration, but there was still something in his stance that suggested resilience, a quiet defiance that Valera had noted in her previous examinations of the human. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to the examination chair. Nathan complied without a word, his green eyes scanning the laboratory with the same careful attention he always displayed. Nothing escaped his notice, not the new spectrometer in the corner, nor the slight upgrade to the security protocols on the lab's main terminal. "Extend your arm," Valera said, preparing the collection device. Again, he obeyed silently. This was routine for him now. Blood tests were conducted quarterly to monitor for diseases and to ensure that prisoners weren't developing adverse reactions to the standardized nutrition provided in the facility. Valera pressed the collection device against the inside of Nathan's elbow. The small needle pierced his skin with precision, drawing a sample of crimson liquid into the transparent vial. Standard procedure. Nothing remarkable. "All done," she said, removing the device and securing the sample. "You may return to your cell." Nathan nodded once, standing up as the guard drone moved closer to escort him out. But before they reached the door, a high-pitched chime sounded from the analysis terminal. Valera frowned. The preliminary analysis was complete already? That was unusually fast. She approached the terminal, expecting to see the standard readout of blood components, hormone levels, and basic genetic markers. Instead, the screen displayed a message that made her breath catch in her throat. Genetic anomaly detected. Royal Centurion bloodline markers present. Imperial Protocol 7A activated. Message: "Release him, Your Majesty." Valera stared at the screen, her six-fingered hands hovering over the terminal as if afraid to touch it. This was impossible. A human with Centurion royal genetic markers? It had to be a malfunction. "Is there a problem, Doctor?" Nathan asked, his voice breaking the stunned silence. Valera quickly locked the terminal screen and turned to face the prisoner. For the first time, she looked at him, really looked at him, searching for any sign that might explain the impossible readout. "Guard, return the prisoner to the holding area, not his cell," she ordered, her voice steady despite her internal turmoil. "I need to verify something with this sample." The drone beeped in acknowledgement and guided Nathan out of the laboratory. Once alone, Valera initiated a full diagnostic on the analysis equipment, then ran the blood sample through a secondary testing protocol. The results were identical. Prisoner 47C, 89, Nathan Brooks of Earth, somehow carried genetic markers exclusive to the Centurion royal lineage, markers that should be impossible for any non-Centurion to possess. And the system had not just identified them. It had activated an ancient protocol programmed into the very core of Centurion governmental systems. Imperial Protocol 7A was designed to prevent the accidental imprisonment of anyone with royal blood. It was a safeguard from centuries past, when civil wars and political machinations had sometimes led to legitimate heirs being imprisoned under false pretenses. The message was clear and unequivocal. The system recognized this human as royalty. Valara's third heart, the one responsible for logical processing in Zenturian physiology, began beating faster. This would need to be reported immediately, but to whom? If she notified prison director Xylax, the information might be suppressed or the prisoner might disappear to avoid a diplomatic incident. If she contacted the Imperial Palace directly, she could be accused of overstepping her authority. She made her decision. This was too important, too unprecedented to be handled through normal channels. She would contact her cousin, Subcommander Renick, in the Imperial Guard. He would know how to proceed. Within hours, the quiet routine of Detention Center 47 was shattered by the arrival of a sleek, black Imperial shuttle. Armed guards in the distinctive crimson armor of the royal house disembarked first, followed by a figure that caused every Zenturian present to bow deeply. High Counselor the Ram, the Emperor's most trusted advisor. Nathan watched the commotion from the holding area, unsure why he had not been returned to his cell. Something had changed after the blood test, but no one had bothered to explain what. Now, as he observed the procession of important-looking Zenturians making their way through the prison's main corridor, he felt a spark of hope for the first time in nearly a year. Whatever was happening, it had to be connected to him. There were no other notable prisoners in this facility. The door to the holding area slid open, and 4 royal guards entered, followed by the imposing figure of High Counselor the Ram. Standing over 7 feet tall with the characteristic blue-gray skin of the Zenturian elite and wearing ornate ceremonial robes, Theram's presence filled the room. His 3 eyes, the third, central eye being the mark of the highest echelon of Zenturian society, focused intently on Nathan. "You are the human designated Nathan Brooks?" the Ram asked, his voice deep and resonant. "I am," Nathan replied, standing as straight as his weakened condition would allow. To his astonishment, the Ram lowered himself in a shallow bow. "A grave error has been made, one that the Zenturian Empire deeply regrets. You are to be released immediately and escorted to the Imperial Palace on Zener Prime." Nathan blinked in confusion. "I don't understand. What's happening?" Theram's expression was unreadable to human eyes, but his tone conveyed a mixture of reverence and uncertainty. "Your blood carries markers of the Imperial House of Zenter. According to our most sacred laws, you are to be treated with the respect due to your heritage." "My heritage?" Nathan echoed, bewildered. "There must be some mistake. I'm human, from Earth. I have no connection to Zenter." "That is what we must determine," the Ram replied. "The Emperor himself wishes to meet with you and unravel this mystery. Your restraints will be removed, and you will be provided with appropriate attire befitting your status." As if to emphasize his words, one of the guards approached and deactivated the gravitational restraints around Nathan's ankles. For the first time in almost a year, he could move freely. "What about my personal effects?" Nathan asked, thinking of the few items he had possessed when arrested, particularly the pendant his grandmother had given him before he left Earth. It was supposed to be a family heirloom, though he had always suspected it was just a trinket she had picked up at some interstellar bazaar during her days as a merchant ship captain. "All your possessions will be returned to you," the Ram assured him, including the artifact that was catalogued as jewelry of unknown origin. Nathan was escorted to a private chamber where he was provided with a sonic shower, a luxury compared to the water-conserving cleansing stations in the prison, and given clothing that seemed to be a simplified version of Zenturian formal wear adapted for human physiology. The fabric was softer than anything he had felt in months, possibly years. When he emerged, refreshed and properly dressed, he was presented with a small box containing his confiscated possessions. With trembling fingers, he opened it and immediately sought out the pendant, a flat, oval stone of deep blue set in what he had always assumed was silver. It appeared unchanged, but something about it now seemed different, more significant in light of the day's extraordinary events. "We are ready to depart," the ram announced from the doorway. "The Emperor awaits." The journey to Zinner Prime took 3 days in the Imperial shuttle, which traveled through hyperspace at speeds that commercial vessels could only dream of achieving. During this time, Nathan was treated not as a prisoner, but as an honored guest. He was given a private cabin, served exquisite meals prepared by the shuttle's culinary droids, and provided with access to the vessel's information systems, though he noticed that certain sections remained restricted. The ram visited him daily, ostensibly to ensure his comfort, but clearly to observe him closely. During these visits, Nathan carefully extracted information about what had led to his sudden change in status. The blood test detected Imperial genetic markers, the ram explained during one such conversation. Markers that are impossible to forge or replicate. They are not merely genetic sequences, but quantum-encoded patterns that exist at the subatomic level within Zenturian royal DNA. "But how could I possibly have such markers?" Nathan asked. "I'm human. My parents were human. Their parents were human." Theram's central eye narrowed slightly. "Are you certain of your complete lineage?" The markers suggest a connection going back approximately 4 generations. Nathan thought of his grandmother, Eliza Brooks, who had traveled extensively as a young woman before settling on Earth to raise her family. She had always been reticent about her early adventures, deflecting questions with vague stories about trade routes and cargo manifests. "My grandmother was a space merchant," he admitted. "She traveled throughout this sector before retiring to Earth. But she was human, just like the rest of my family." "Perhaps," the ram said, his tone suggesting he was not convinced. "There are historical precedents for genetic transference between species, though never with the royal markers. It is one of many possibilities we must explore." On the final day of their journey, as the shuttle began its approach to Zinter Prime, Nathan stood at the viewport, mesmerized by the sight of the Zenturian homeworld. The planet was larger than Earth, with vast oceans of deep purple and land masses of rich greens and browns. Orbital structures glittered like jewels around it, and the famous rings of Zinter, artificial constructs built by the ancient Zenturians thousands of years ago, encircled the equator in a display of engineering prowess that still awed visitors from across the galaxy. "It's beautiful," Nathan murmured. "It is home," the ram replied, having entered the observation deck silently. "And perhaps, in some way not yet understood, it is a part of your heritage as well." The shuttle descended through the atmosphere, bypassing the sprawling capital city of Zenturia and heading directly toward the Imperial Palace, a massive structure of gleaming spires and domes that stood atop a natural plateau overlooking the Varelian Sea. As they landed on a private platform high above the main palace grounds, Nathan felt a strange sensation, a pulling at the edges of his consciousness, as if something was calling to him. He absently reached for his pendant, which he now wore around his neck, and found it warm to the touch. The ram noticed the gesture. "The artifact you wear, may I examine it more closely?" Nathan hesitated, but then removed the pendant and handed it to the High Counselor. The ram studied it with all 3 eyes, paying particular attention to the faint etchings around the edge of the blue stone. "This is not merely jewelry," he said finally. "It bears the mark of the ancestral vault, a repository of royal artifacts dating back to the First Dynasty. How did you come to possess this?" "My grandmother gave it to me. She said it was a family heirloom." The ram returned the pendant with what Nathan interpreted as reverence. "This mystery deepens with each revelation. The Emperor must be informed of this development immediately." The Emperor of Zinter, Varaxian the Wise, was not what Nathan had expected. Rather than an imposing figure draped in opulence, he was a slender, almost frail-looking Zenturian whose blue-gray skin had faded to a pale azure with age. His central eye was clouded, suggesting partial blindness, but his 2 standard eyes were sharp and alert. The throne room was vast but sparsely decorated, with large windows offering panoramic views of the Varelian Sea. Only a handful of advisors and guards were present, giving the audience an unexpectedly intimate atmosphere. "Approach," The Emperor commanded, his voice surprisingly strong for his apparent age. Nathan walked forward and stopped at the indicated spot, about 10 paces from the elevated throne. He wasn't sure if he should bow or kneel, so he settled for a respectful inclination of his head. "You are the human with the blood of Zinter," the Emperor stated, not a question but a confirmation. "So I've been told, Your Majesty," Nathan replied carefully. "Though I don't understand how it's possible." The Emperor studied him for a long moment. "Show me the pendant." Nathan removed the necklace and held it up. A guard stepped forward to take it to the Emperor, but Varaxian waved him away. "Hold it higher," he instructed Nathan. As Nathan raised the pendant, a beam of sunlight from one of the high windows struck the blue stone, causing it to glow with an inner light. The Emperor's clouded central eye suddenly cleared, turning a vibrant shade of gold. "The tear of Zaloran," Varaxian whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "Not seen in the Imperial House for over a century." The assembled advisors murmured in astonishment, and even the Ram seemed taken aback. "What is the tear of Zaloran?" Nathan asked. "It is a key," the Emperor replied. "A key to our past, and, perhaps, to our future. It is also proof that your blood connection to the Imperial House is no accident or anomaly." He leaned forward, his gaze intensifying. "Tell me, Nathan Brooks of Earth, what do you know of your grandmother?" "She was a merchant captain. She traveled extensively throughout this sector before settling on Earth. She died when I was 15. And she gave you this pendant?" Nathan nodded. "On my 12th birthday. She said it was important, that it had been in our family for generations, but I always thought she was just trying to make a simple gift seem more special." The Emperor settled back in his throne, his expression thoughtful. "There is a story, not widely known outside the imperial family, about the Princess Zalora, daughter of Emperor Varaxian IV. She disappeared during a diplomatic mission to the outer colonies approximately 120 Earth years ago. The official records state that her ship was lost in an ion storm, but her body was never recovered, and the tear of Zaloran, her personal sigil, vanished with her." Nathan's mind raced to make the connection. His grandmother would have been born around 100 years ago, which meant, "You're suggesting that my grandmother might have been this missing princess? That's impossible. She was human, not Centurion." "Was she?" the Emperor asked softly. "Or did she merely appear human? There are technologies, ancient and forbidden, that can rewrite the physical form at the cellular level while preserving the core genetic markers of Centurion royalty. Such technologies were rumored to exist in the time of Varaxian IV, though their use was strictly prohibited." Nathan felt dizzy with the implications. Why would a Centurion princess disguise herself as a human and abandon her royal position? "That," said the Emperor, "is what we must discover. The historical records from that period are incomplete, deliberately so, I have always suspected. But with the return of the tear of Zaloran and a living descendant of Zalora's bloodline, we may finally uncover the truth." The Emperor raised a hand, and an attendant approached with a small device. "This will painlessly extract a more comprehensive genetic sample. With your permission?" Nathan nodded, still reeling from the revelations. The attendant pressed the device against his forearm, and he felt a slight tingling sensation as it worked. "We will analyze this sample thoroughly," the Emperor explained. "If what I suspect is true, you carry within you not just the royal bloodline, but possibly the memories of your ancestors. Encoded quantum information passed down through generations." "I don't understand," Nathan said. "How could I have memories that aren't my own?" "The royal bloodline of Zinter is not merely a matter of genetics," the Ram interjected. "At the quantum level, certain neural patterns are preserved and transmitted to descendants. These patterns can manifest as instincts, dreams, or inexplicable knowledge of things never learned." Nathan thought about the recurring dreams he'd had since childhood. Dreams of flying through purple skies over vast oceans, of walking through corridors that seemed to shift and change. Dreams he had always attributed to an overactive imagination. "If what you're saying is true," Nathan said slowly, "then why was I arrested? Why was I treated as a criminal for nearly a year?" The Emperor's expression darkened. That is a question that will be answered in due course. There are factions within our empire who would not welcome the return of Zalora's line. Your arrest may not have been as accidental as it appeared. A chill ran down Nathan's spine. Am I in danger? You are under the protection of the Imperial House now, the Emperor assured him. But caution would be wise. There are centuries of political intrigue at play here, and you have unwittingly stepped into the center of it. The Emperor rose from his throne, causing everyone in the room to bow deeply. You will be given quarters in the palace while we investigate further. Consider yourself an honored guest of the Imperial House, not a prisoner. As Nathan was escorted from the throne room, his mind whirled with questions. If what the Emperor suggested was true, then his entire understanding of his family history, of his own identity, was built on fabrications. He was not just Nathan Brooks, wrongfully imprisoned human. He was potentially the heir to secrets that had been buried for over a century, secrets that some might kill to keep hidden. And somewhere in his genes, in the quantum echoes of ancestors he had never known existed, lay the truth of who he really was. The quarters assigned to Nathan were luxurious beyond anything he had experienced before his imprisonment, or even before his arrest, for that matter. The spacious suite featured panoramic windows overlooking the Varelian Sea, with its waters shifting from deep purple to iridescent blue as Zinter's twin suns moved across the sky. The furniture adjusted automatically to accommodate his human physiology, and the environmental controls maintained perfect comfort without any input required. Despite these comforts, Nathan felt like a prisoner of a different kind. For 3 days, he had been left largely alone, visited only by servants bringing meals and by medical personnel who collected additional biological samples. No one would answer his questions about what the genetic analysis had revealed or what would happen next. On the 4th morning, as he stood at the window watching vessels navigate the coastal shipping lanes, the door to his suite slid open without the customary announcement. Nathan turned, expecting another silent medical technician, but instead found himself face to face with a Zenturian female whose bearing immediately suggested nobility. You must be the human who has thrown the palace into such disarray, she said, her voice melodic but with an edge of steel beneath it. I am Zavara, Duchess of the Northern Territories and cousin to Emperor Varaxian. Nathan bowed slightly, recalling the protocols he had observed during his brief time in the palace. It's an honor, Your Grace. I'm Nathan Brooks. Yes, I know who you are, or who you claim to be. She moved into the room with fluid grace, her formal attire shimmering with embedded light particles that shifted color with her movements. The entire imperial court is abuzz with theories about your sudden appearance and the supposed royal blood you carry. I didn't claim anything, Nathan replied evenly. I was a prisoner until your scientists found something in my blood that changed everything. I'm as confused by all this as anyone. Zavara studied him with 3 penetrating eyes. Unlike the Emperor's clouded central eye, hers was sharp and clear, the distinctive gold of the highest Zenturian nobility. Are you? How convenient that must be. Nathan felt a flash of irritation. Being wrongfully imprisoned for nearly a year, and then suddenly told I might be part alien royalty isn't what I'd call convenient. A slight smile curved Zavara's lips. You have spirit, at least. That much is Zenturian. She approached the window, standing beside him to gaze out at the sea. Do you know why I've come to see you? I assume it's not just to welcome me to the family. She laughed, a sound like crystal chimes. Indeed not. I've come because the preliminary results of your genetic analysis have been completed, and they are troubling to many in the imperial court. Nathan's heart quickened. What did they find? Confirmation, she said simply. Your genetic material contains quantum-encoded patterns that could only have come from the royal bloodline, specifically from Princess Zalora's lineage. The analysis also revealed evidence of ancient genetic manipulation technology, just as the Emperor suspected. So it's true? My grandmother was actually a Zenturian princess. Zavara turned to face him directly. It appears so, and that makes you something unprecedented. A human Zenturian hybrid with a legitimate claim to royal status. Nathan shook his head in disbelief. I don't want any royal status. I just want to understand how this happened and then go back to my life. Your life? Zavara's tone was incredulous. Your life, as you knew it, ended the moment that blood test identified your heritage. There are those in the court who see you as a threat to the established order, others who view you as an opportunity, and still others who believe you are the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. Prophecy? What prophecy? Zavara waved a six-fingered hand dismissively. An old tale, likely irrelevant. What matters now is that the Emperor has called a meeting of the High Council, and your presence is required. They're waiting for us now. As they walked through the palace corridors, Nathan noticed the reactions of those they passed. The quick, furtive glances, the whispered conversations that halted abruptly as they approached. He was an object of fascination and fear, a living disruption to centuries of Zenturian tradition. The High Council chamber was a circular room dominated by a round table of polished stone that seemed to glow from within. Seated around it were 12 Zenturians of obvious importance, with the Emperor at the position designated by the imperial insignia inlaid in the table's surface. High Counselor the Ram stood at the Emperor's right hand. All eyes turned to Nathan as he entered with Zavara. The Emperor gestured to an empty seat, one that, Nathan noted with apprehension, bore a small version of the imperial insignia. Nathan Brooks, the Emperor announced formally. You have been invited to this extraordinary session of the High Council because matters concerning your heritage and its implications for the Zenturian Empire can no longer be discussed in your absence. Nathan took his seat, acutely aware of the tension in the room. Thank you, Your Majesty. I hope I can help clarify whatever questions the Council might have. A Zenturian with elaborate facial markings, indicators of military rank, Nathan had learned, spoke first. Let us not pretend this is a mere matter of curiosity. If this human truly carries Zalora's bloodline, then we must address the security implications immediately. Grand Marshal Krezix. The Emperor acknowledged with a slight nod. Your concerns are noted, but premature. We are still determining the full extent of Nathan Brooks' connection to the Imperial House. The genetic evidence is conclusive, stated another counselor, this one wearing the distinctive indigo robes of the scientific ministry. The quantum markers in his DNA are authentic. The only question that remains is how Princess Zalora's genetic material came to be integrated with human DNA and why. The Ram stepped forward. We believe we have found answers to those questions in the sealed archives. With Your Majesty's permission? The Emperor nodded, and the Ram activated a holographic display in the center of the table. Images of ancient documents and three-dimensional models of DNA structures appeared, rotating slowly for all to see. These records were sealed by direct order of Emperor Varaxian IV following Princess Zalora's disappearance, the Ram explained. They detail a project of great secrecy, the development of genetic transformation technology that could completely alter a Zenturian's physical form while preserving the essential quantum markers of their identity. Why would such technology be developed? Asked a counselor Nathan didn't recognize. According to these records, it was created as a response to a specific threat, the Corvian prophecy. A murmur ran through the council chamber. Even Zavara, who had dismissed the prophecy earlier, leaned forward with interest. The Corvian prophecy has long been dismissed as superstition, the Emperor said, his voice cutting through the whispers. But my grandfather took it seriously enough to develop this technology and apparently to use it on his own daughter. For those of us not versed in ancient superstitions, Nathan interjected, what exactly is this prophecy? The Emperor's gaze settled on him. The Corvian seer, who lived nearly 1,000 years ago, foretold that the Zenturian Empire would face its greatest threat from within, a corruption that would spread from the heart of the imperial lineage and eventually destroy our civilization. But she also prophesied that salvation would come through the blood twice removed and returned anew. For centuries, scholars debated the meaning of these words. And your grandfather interpreted this to mean that the royal bloodline needed to be, what? Hidden within another species? Nathan asked, struggling to make sense of it all. Not just hidden, the Ram corrected. Transformed and preserved, to be reintroduced when the time was right. The records suggest that Emperor Varaxian IV believed the corruption had already begun in his time, centered around the heir apparent, his son Cresian, who would later become Emperor Cresian the Just. Grand Marshal Krezix slammed a fist on the table. This is absurd. You're suggesting that Emperor Varaxian IV sent his daughter away because he suspected his own son of some nebulous corruption? Cresian the Just was one of our greatest emperors. History is written by the victorious, Zavara said softly. And if Princess Zelora truly fled with this technology, became human, and lived her life on Earth, then perhaps there was something she feared greatly enough to abandon her birthright. Nathan thought of his grandmother, the woman he had known as Eliza Brooks. She had been kind but reserved, with a sadness in her eyes that he had never understood. Had she been living in exile, watching from afar as her brother ruled the empire she had fled? There's more, the Ram continued, scrolling through the holographic documents. These records contain details about a disease, a genetic degradation that affects the central neural pathways of Zenturians. It begins with the clouding of the central eye and progresses slowly but inevitably to complete neural collapse. All eyes turn to the Emperor, whose central eye bore the clouded appearance the Ram had just described. Yes, Varaxian said gravely. I have the early stages of this condition, as did my father before me, and his father before him. It has afflicted the ruling line for generations, though we have kept it secret to prevent panic or political instability. Our scientists have slowed its progression but found no cure. And now we learn that Princess Zelora apparently fled rather than face this deterioration, said the counselor in indigo robes. Perhaps this was the corruption the prophecy spoke of, a literal corruption of our genetic code. But how does this relate to me? Nathan asked, the pieces still not fitting together in his mind. The Ram manipulated the holographic display again, bringing up a comparison of two DNA structures. This is a simplified representation of your DNA compared to that of Emperor Varaxian. The degradation that affects the imperial line is absent in your genetic code. The human DNA integrated with Centurion royal markers has somehow corrected or bypassed the flaw. The implications hit Nathan like a physical blow. You're saying I'm what? A cure? Potentially, the Emperor confirmed. Your hybrid genetic structure may hold the key to saving not just the imperial line, but all Zenturians who carry this flaw, a significant percentage of our population, as it turns out. The degradation has spread further than we realized, particularly among the nobility who have intermarried with the royal line for centuries. And that's why I was really brought here, Nathan said, understanding dawning. Not because of some ancient claim to royalty, but because my blood might save your species. Both reasons are valid, the Emperor replied. You are of the royal blood, and you may indeed be our salvation, just as the prophecy foretold. Grand Marshal Krezix rose from his seat. This is all highly convenient. A human appears, claims royal blood, and is suddenly the answer to our most critical problem? I suggest caution, Your Majesty. What if this is an elaborate human plot to infiltrate the imperial house? I didn't appear anywhere, Nathan countered, his patience wearing thin. I was arrested on false charges and imprisoned for nearly a year. If this was my plan, it was a terrible one. Your arrest, the Ram said carefully, is another matter that requires investigation. The charges against you were indeed questionable, and the timing, just as you were beginning to explore your grandmother's past, suggests something more than coincidence. A chill ran down Nathan's spine. Are you saying I was deliberately targeted? That someone knew who I was before I did. It is a possibility we cannot dismiss, the Emperor agreed. There have always been factions opposed to any change in the status quo, who would view the return of Zelora's line as a threat to their power. Or perhaps, Zavara suggested, her voice cutting through the tension, those who knew of the prophecy and the genetic degradation sought to eliminate a potential cure before it could be discovered. The council chamber erupted in accusations and denials, with various factions pointing fingers at each other. Nathan sat silently, watching the political maneuvering play out around him, feeling increasingly like a pawn in a game whose rules he didn't understand. Finally, the Emperor raised a hand, and silence fell immediately. Enough. These matters will be investigated thoroughly. For now, we must focus on the most pressing issue, determining whether Nathan Brooks' genetic structure can indeed provide a cure for the degradation, and if so, how to implement it safely. "And what of his status?" asked one of the counselors who had remained silent until now. "If he is of the royal blood, does he have a claim to imperial authority?" All eyes turned to Nathan, who felt the weight of centuries of tradition and expectation bearing down on him. He looked at the pendant, the tear of Zaloran, which he still wore around his neck, then at the Emperor, whose clouded central eye reminded him of the disease slowly working its way through the Zenturian ruler's neural pathways. "I make no claim to your throne," Nathan said firmly. "I didn't come here seeking power or position. But if my blood can help your people, I'm willing to do whatever is necessary." The Emperor's expression was unreadable, but Nathan thought he detected a hint of relief. A wise and generous response. "The High Council will adjourn for now, while our scientists continue their work with Nathan's genetic material. I ask all of you to maintain absolute secrecy regarding these matters until we have more definitive answers." As the council members filed out, the Ram approached Nathan. "The Emperor wishes to speak with you privately. Please follow me." They walked through a series of corridors that seemed older than the rest of the palace, with walls of natural stone rather than the synthetic materials used elsewhere. Eventually, they reached a small, circular chamber with a domed ceiling painted to resemble the night sky of Zenter. The Emperor was already there, standing before an ancient-looking device that hummed with quiet energy. "Leave us, the Ram," he commanded. When they were alone, Varaxian turned to Nathan. "You handled yourself well in the council chamber. Politics is not an easy game, even for those born to it." "I wasn't trying to play any game," Nathan replied honestly. "I just want to understand what's happening and how I fit into it all." A refreshing approach. The Emperor gestured to the device. "Do you know what this is?" Nathan shook his head. "It is a memory extractor, one of the few remaining from the ancient days of our civilization. It can access the quantum-encoded memories stored within your genetic structure, the echoes of your ancestors, including Princess Zalora." Nathan stared at the device with apprehension. "Is it safe?" "Mostly," the Emperor admitted. "There is some risk, but it may be our best chance to understand why my aunt fled and what she knew about the degradation that now threatens us all." "You want me to use it?" "I am asking, not commanding. The choice must be yours." Nathan considered the request. Part of him wanted nothing more than to return to Earth and forget this entire strange episode. But another part, perhaps the part that carried Zaloran blood, felt a responsibility to see this through. "What exactly would happen if I agreed?" "You would sit there," the Emperor said, indicating a reclined chair connected to the device. "The extractor would stimulate the quantum patterns in your DNA, bringing forward the stored memories. You would experience them as if they were your own, though they belonged to your ancestor. And you think these memories might contain information about the degradation? A cure, perhaps. It is possible. Princess Zalora was a brilliant scientist in her own right. If she understood the nature of the degradation and took steps to ensure her descendants would be free of it, she may have left knowledge that could save countless lives." Nathan approached the chair cautiously. Will I still be me afterward? Will I remember who I am?" "Yes," the Emperor assured him. "The process does not overwrite your own memories or identity. It merely brings the ancestral memories to the surface temporarily." After a moment's more hesitation, Nathan sat in the chair. "All right, let's do this." The Emperor activated the device, and a soft humming filled the chamber. Nathan felt a tingling sensation spreading from the base of his skull down his spine, not unpleasant, but distinctly alien. "Focus on the pendant," Varaxian instructed. "The tear of Zaloran was designed to interact with this technology. It will help guide the process." Nathan clutched the blue stone, which had begun to glow faintly. The tingling intensified, and suddenly the room around him seemed to blur and shift. He closed his eyes against a wave of dizziness, and when he opened them again, he was no longer in the chamber with Emperor Varaxian. He was in a laboratory, sleek and advanced even by Zenturian standards, and he was looking through the eyes of someone else. A female Zenturian with delicate hands that moved with practiced precision over complex equipment. Princess Zellora. Her thoughts flowed through Nathan's mind as if they were his own, a strange doubling of consciousness that was disorienting at first but quickly became manageable. The tests are conclusive, Zellora was saying to someone just out of sight. The degradation is spreading faster than we predicted. Within 5 generations, it will affect more than 60% of the noble houses, and eventually, it will reach the general population. And my son? Came a voice that Nathan somehow knew belonged to Emperor Varaxian IV. Cresian. The markers are present in his DNA, Zellora confirmed, her voice heavy with regret. The degradation has already begun in his neural pathways, though he shows no symptoms yet. In time, his central eye will cloud, and then the cognitive decline will follow. And there is no cure? Not with our current technology, Zellora replied. But I have a theory, radical and untested, but with potential. The degradation is a result of excessive genetic purity, the consequence of centuries of selective breeding within the noble houses. We need to introduce new genetic material that can integrate with our quantum patterns without disrupting them. You speak of interbreeding with another species? The Emperor's tone was shocked. The houses would never accept such a solution. Not interbreeding as traditionally understood, Zellora clarified. I've developed a process that would transform a Zenturian at the cellular level, allowing them to take on the physical characteristics of another species while preserving the essential quantum patterns of their identity. Their descendants would be hybrids in the truest sense, carrying both the outward traits of the adopted species and the quantum-encoded heritage of Zenter. And you believe these hybrids would be free of the degradation? Yes. The introduction of new genetic material would break the cycle of deterioration. And eventually, if these hybrids returned to Zenter and their blood was reintroduced to our population, it could provide the diversity needed to eliminate the degradation entirely. The scene shifted, and Nathan found himself in what appeared to be the Emperor's private study. Zellora was arguing passionately with her father. Cresian has discovered our research, she said urgently. He and his supporters in the military council are moving to shut it down. They see any change to our genetic purity as a threat to Zenturian superiority. My son has always been a traditionalist, the Emperor said wearily. Perhaps in time, he can be made to understand the necessity. There is no time, Zellora interrupted. The degradation in his neural pathways is affecting his judgment, making him paranoid and resistant to reason. He's already ordered the arrest of 3 of my research assistants on charges of genetic treason. Father, he had them executed without trial. The Emperor's 3 eyes widened in shock. Impossible. Cresian would never. He did, and he will not stop there. He sees my work as a direct threat to his future rule and to the purity of the imperial line. I've heard rumors that he plans to have me arrested next, to make an example of me. I will speak with him, the Emperor promised. I will make him understand. It's too late for that, Zellora said, her voice breaking. The degradation has progressed further than we realized. His central eye may still be clear, but his mind is already compromised. And he has too many supporters who see my research as heresy against Zenturian tradition. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. I've made my decision, Father. I will use the transformation technology on myself. I will become the test subject and ensure that the cure survives, even if I must leave Zenter to do so. Zellora, no? There must be another way. There isn't. Not if we want to save our people. She touched her father's face gently. The Corvian prophecy speaks of blood twice removed and returned anew. I believe this is what it means. The royal blood, removed from its Centurion form and later returned in a new hybrid form that can heal the degradation. I must be that blood twice removed, Father. And someday, my descendants must be the blood returned anew. The scene shifted again, and Nathan experienced a series of fragmented memories. Zalora undergoing the transformation process, the pain of cellular reconstruction as her body changed from Zenturian to human, her escape from Zinter aboard a small, fast vessel, her arrival on Earth, and the beginning of her new life as a human woman named Eliza, her career as a merchant ship captain, traveling the stars but always careful to avoid Zenturian territory, and finally, her decision to settle permanently on Earth, to marry, to have children, and to ensure that the quantum patterns of Zenturian royalty would continue in a bloodline free from the degradation. Her last coherent memory was of giving the pendant, the tear of Zaloran, to her grandson, Nathan. In it, she had encoded everything: the truth of her identity, the nature of the degradation, and most importantly, the genetic key that could unlock a cure. With a gasp, Nathan returned to the present, finding himself still sitting in the chair in the domed chamber. Emperor Varaxian stood before him, concern evident in his expression. "You were in the memory trance for nearly an hour," the Emperor said. "What did you see?" Nathan's head pounded with the echoes of Zalora's memories and the weight of the knowledge she had passed down to him. "Everything," he replied hoarsely. "I saw everything." She knew. My grandmother knew that someday one of her descendants would return to Zenter. She planned for it. And the degradation? Did she find a cure? Nathan touched the pendant, which now glowed brightly, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Not exactly a cure, but something better. A prevention. The pendant contains data, genetic sequencing data that could be used to introduce the hybrid factors into the Zenturian population gradually, strengthening the bloodline without changing your physical characteristics. The Emperor's clouded central eye seemed to clear slightly as he focused on the glowing pendant. Then the prophecy was true. The blood twice removed has returned anew to save us from the corruption within. "There's more," Nathan said, standing on shaky legs. "Princess Zalora, my grandmother, she was right about Cresian. The degradation affected his mind long before physical symptoms appeared. He became paranoid, obsessed with genetic purity. And according to her memories, he's not the only one. Many in the noble houses who carry the degradation experience personality changes, increased aggression, paranoia, xenophobia, before showing physical symptoms." Understanding dawned in the Emperor's expression, including, perhaps, whoever arranged for your arrest and imprisonment. If there are those among us who suffer from the advanced stages of degradation, then they might see me as a threat to everything they believe in, Nathan finished. Just as Cresian saw Zalora's work as a threat, the Emperor moved to a communication panel on the wall. "The Ram, assemble the High Council immediately, and double the guards around Nathan's quarters. We may have enemies closer than we realized." The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. The data stored in the tier of Zaloran was extracted and analyzed by the Empire's top geneticists, who confirmed what Zalora had discovered a century earlier. The hybrid genetic structure could indeed prevent the neural degradation that threatened the Zenturian species. A treatment was developed using Nathan's blood as a template, and the first to receive it was Emperor Varaxian himself. Within days, the clouding in his central eye began to clear, and scans showed the degradation in his neural pathways had halted and begun to reverse. News of the miracle cure spread quickly through the palace, though the full story of its origin remained known only to the High Council and a few trusted scientists. Plans were made to distribute the treatment throughout the Empire, beginning with those most severely affected. Through it all, Nathan found himself treated with increasing respect and even reverence by the palace staff and nobles alike. Though few knew the details of his heritage, rumors of his importance to the Emperor had elevated his status considerably. A week after the memory extractor session, Nathan was summoned to the Emperor's private gardens, a lush expanse of Zenturian flora that covered several acres of the palace grounds. He found Varaxian sitting beside a reflecting pool, looking stronger and more vital than Nathan had seen him yet. "The treatment continues to exceed expectations," the Emperor said by way of greeting. "The medical team believes the degradation will be completely reversed within a month." "I'm glad," Nathan replied sincerely. Zalora would be pleased to know her work finally succeeded. Indeed. The Emperor gestured for Nathan to sit beside him. Which brings me to the question of your future. The High Council has been discussing your status at length. As a direct descendant of Princess Zalora, you have a legitimate claim to noble status within our empire. Some even argue that you have a claim to the throne itself, though that is complicated by your human physiology. Nathan laughed softly. I have no interest in becoming the Emperor of Zinter, Your Majesty. I'm human in every way that matters, regardless of what my blood says. As you wish. But you cannot simply return to your previous life as if none of this happened. Your arrest, as we've discovered, was orchestrated by a faction within the military council who had learned of your connection to Zalora and feared what it might mean. They have been dealt with, but others may see you as a threat or an opportunity. Your safety on Earth cannot be guaranteed. So I'm trapped here? Nathan asked, unable to keep the dismay from his voice. Not trapped, Varaxian corrected. Honored. I am offering you an official position as Imperial Liaison to Earth, a newly created diplomatic role that would allow you to travel between our worlds freely, with the full protection of the Imperial House. You would help us establish more direct relations with Earth governments and facilitate cultural and scientific exchanges. Ambassador, Nathan said, considering the idea. Of sorts, yes. Though your primary allegiance would be to Zinter, not Earth. You would be recognized as a member of the Imperial family, a prince of the blood, with all the privileges and responsibilities that entails. Nathan gazed out over the garden, watching the iridescent insects that flitted between the exotic blooms. A month ago, he had been a prisoner in a cell with no windows, no hope of release, and no future to look forward to. Now he was being offered a position of power and privilege beyond anything he could have imagined. But more than that, he was being offered a purpose, a way to bridge two worlds that had shaped his existence without his knowledge. He thought of Zalora, who had sacrificed everything to ensure that someday her descendants might return to save her people. He thought of his grandmother Eliza, who had lived a quiet life on Earth, but had carefully preserved the knowledge that would be needed when the time came. I accept, he said finally, on one condition. Name it. The charges against me are officially expunged, and a formal apology is issued for my wrongful imprisonment. Not just for me, but as a matter of principle. The Emperor nodded. Already done. The imperial decree was issued this morning. Nathan smiled. Then I guess I have a new job. And we have a new beginning, the Emperor replied. Thanks to the blood twice removed and returned anew. As they walked back toward the palace, Nathan felt the weight of the tear of Zaloran against his chest. No longer just a family heirloom, but a symbol of the extraordinary journey that had brought him from a prison cell to the heart of an empire. His grandmother had known this day would come, had planned for it across the span of a century. And now, as the first rays of Zinter's twin suns crested the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Nathan Brooks, human by birth, Zinturian by blood, and diplomat by choice, prepared to write the next chapter in a story that had begun long before he was born. The prison blood test that should have been routine had changed everything, and the empire that had once imprisoned him now hailed him as its savior. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.